Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today's voice is all the way from Texas, which, as he already knows, I'm extremely excited about. It's Nick Bagley. So first of all, thank you for coming on and your time today, Nick.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's super cool because, like we touched base on, actually getting some different messages across on a podcast platform. However, I mean, our subject today, I feel like it's being explored more by people in the space. And we're going to be talking about essentially building a body for life and what that looks like. So really, really liked one of your reels where you were saying, are you thinking about, can you lift weight at age 70 as the example? Or are you debilitating yourself so much right now that actually when you get to that age, what is your quality of life?
Yep, 100%. That obviously scales up and down depending on who we're looking at, right? Because I've worked with people who go from have never lifted at all to training with 𝗪𝗏 and helping him improve his mobility, right? So it's there's a broad spectrum of what that looks like for the person specific condition goals and where they're at that time.
Yeah. And actually your point there, are we respecting the level we're at and the work we're putting in, but also what are we doing to respect our bodies in the realms of physique development? Because I feel like we expect a lot, particularly in a competition prep, you're fueled by getting leaner and everything's working towards you getting to stage. And then it's like, do you stop and go, well, actually, that reverse out in the post-show period into your growth phase, are we treating that with the same level of importance as getting to stage? Because I'm sure you come across it a lot, maybe more in the female realm. It's like, well, actually, a growth phase, or it's not that motivating because the stage isn't there. But actually, as a competitor, that growth phase is for the stage in 2 years or however long it is, right?
Right. 100%. Yeah, because I mean, we've all know people who compete every year. Every year, they're going to get on stage. They're going to do another show. They're going to talk about the grind. They're going to talk about, this many days out all the time. But then they bring the same physique over and over, and they keep wondering, why am I in second call-outs? Why am I getting fifth and fourth? And it's why do I not make progress? And look, I can't say much as far as placing on stage because the highest I've ever gotten is second. So it's it is what it is as far as placings are concerned, but I think my results over the last few years have kind of spoken for themselves. And it's a matter of, you just have to shift perspective into what success looks like during that time period. And you have to lean into being uncomfortable in whatever phase that we're talking about, right? So everybody understands the concept of being uncomfortable in prep. Everybody knows that we're gonna get to a point where I'm really hungry, where everything sucks and I hate life. Everybody knows if you're pushing a bulk, you're eventually going to hate your life as well in a completely different aspect because you don't want to look at food, but yet you're having to shovel an immense amount of calories on a day-to-day basis every day over and over and over. But the other thing to that, and I think the biggest thing that with the subject we're talking about on longevity is the most important, is leaning into being uncomfortable in a health and maintenance phase, right? How many people do we see rushing straight back from a prep to a bulk and a bulk to a prep, and they skip that time period? They go, cool, I'm going to chill for 4 weeks, get some blood work, everything looks cool, we're back into it. And it's hey, pump the brakes. If you want to do this for a long period of time, you need to stop redlining your engine, right? You need to stop hammering that shit, because even a fucking Porsche needs an oil change, right? You can't just run the oil into the ground and redline it all at the same time. It's gonna explode.
Actually, there was an analogy on here before where I'm sure it was actually David that said it, about different use of stimulants in a prep. And it's you're putting your foot down and then you've got no access to the brake when you add more. And even on that subject, talking about bloods, okay, you get good bloods, tickety-boo, let's push on. But actually, what about organ health as well, which is something that is considered more, because people are dying in this sport when they push to the extremes. But, depending on the level you're at, if you're in the amateur league, maybe, you're not even hearing of these stories. And I think it's probably maybe more prevalent in the US compared to maybe the UK.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, we come back to scaling, right? Because if look at any extreme sport, and like what bodybuilders do to themselves is considered extreme, right? We're looking to push the body to the ultimate limits as far as what is the human body capable of looking like, big and shredded, like on both ends of that spectrum. That's what we're trying to do. So like if we now look at another sport, like F1, right? Like there's kids who are driving go-karts right now who at some point in time want to eventually go up and up and up and try to be an F1 racer, right? So like these kids over here in golf carts, not golf carts, in go-karts, that'd be a lot funnier. But in go-karts, like their version of risk is a lot different than the F1 racers version of risk, right? There's a lot more on the line and there's a lot more to risk at that point, but you're not going to tell that guy to not be a champion. You're not going to tell that guy to not push himself to the limit. And that looks different in each one of those categories as we go up and up. So if I'm talking to someone who's never competed before, then sure, cool. This is what we need to talk about. This is what we need to discuss. Your risk is this. It's probably very minimal, right? Because there's a lot of foundational things we need to do. But if we're talking about someone who's looking to get on the Olympia stage with trying to be the best bodybuilder in the world, they have an understanding of like, hey, there is a potential risk involved with what I am doing to myself. The same as the guy who gets in the F1 car and goes, I could die today. As soon as I turn this engine on, there is no guarantee that I am going to survive to the end of this, right? And it's just a matter of like, how do we mitigate that as best as we possibly can for the individual that's in front of us?
Yeah, and it is tough because you'll relate, I'm sure, you know, when you do start progressing through the sport and you're looking to return to stage multiple times, the tunnel vision kicks in. And I certainly found, you know, I said in my last prep to my partner, my back was really bad from a chronic pain condition. And I said to him, if I get to stage, I'll deal with it after. And I was completely in a hole because I was so focused on the stage. And then I had this sort of revelation, okay, I've done that every prep. And, you know, after the prep, it's just then you touched on it before, you know, there's always that like thrill of, okay, so I'm going to compete this year, I'm going to compete this year. And you forget that actually you're a person, that you've got a body, and also you've got relationships, you know, like I think back to some of the relationships that I've come away from. And I think, well, actually that was probably partly me because of the way I was just pursuing the sport so relentlessly. Particularly, you know, if your partner's not into it or your friends around you, you start to deviate from that circle and you can be left mentally in a spot where it's like, where's everyone gone, you know?
Yep, 100%. And like it comes with any pursuit of something that like you have placed on a pedestal, right? It's not, I don't think it's necessarily like limited to bodybuilding. It's like anyone who has a tunnel vision pursuit towards a specific thing that it's like, hey, look, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get there. And it doesn't matter what's in my way, who's in my way, or what's there. But it's like, there's going to be things that you end up giving up. There's going to be things that you end up messing up. But then there's also going to be people that come along in your life that understand like this is you, like this is what's going to happen. And then those are the people that you hold on to the best for sure, or the most. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like you have to have a tunnel vision in order for it to be successful. But at the same time, it's like we also need to make sure that we also are just aware of our surroundings, you know?
Yeah, it's particularly in a day and age of social media driving a lot of this sort of hype. And of course, people getting into competing because they see it on social media. And it's an extremely inspirational journey. You know, I always say, wow, what you can do with your physique is incredible. But then there it comes the risk reward, how far you want to take it. Now, as a coach yourself, do you have those sort of conversations with people looking to come on that maybe think, oh, I'm going to get to the Olympia and maybe, you know, genetically, et cetera, it's not possible. Do you try and sort of manage the expectations from the off, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, so whenever I do calls with anyone, like I always set up a call with a new client when they come on, we do a chat just like this so that we can make sure that like Look, let's have a conversation, engage, see if we're even a good fit to begin with. Because like, how many times have you started working with somebody and you're like, oh, this is not going to work? And like, there's so many times where like you could have prevented that just by having a conversation with the person. And it's like, it's not necessarily anything against that person, but like just having the conversation gives us an understanding of whether we're on the same path, whether we kind of have a similar mindset, and whether we're going to work well together. Because I don't want to waste anybody's money, nor do I want to waste my time. But when I have those calls, there's always two things that I touch on the most. And one, and being the most important one, is open and honest communication. If you cannot be open and honest with me about everything that is going on that is affecting what we are doing, our relationship is not going to work, right? Like, I need to have an understanding of the things that are affecting you on a day-to-day basis. I need to have an understanding of all these things. And the best way for those people to trust me is by making sure that I'm doing the same in return. So like when I have somebody come to me and they go, hey, look, this is what I want to do. This is what my goal is. This is what the ultimate vision is and whatnot. It's like, okay, cool. Well, that's the goal. This is the ultimate here. What steps do we need to do to take you from where you are right now to this over here? Right. And there's been a wide variety of people who are very, very out of shape, very overweight, that were like, oh, I want to get on stage. And it's like, okay, cool. That's great. But the journey's going to be really long. Like we're looking at multiple years before we do this. If we're going to do this right, and we don't just brutalize you with drugs, right? Like, or aggressive crash dieting, right? It's like, in order to do this in a manner that's going to be at least somewhat sustainable to build a foundation to be able to compete and do well, it's going to be a long process. But then I've also had kids come to me who are like, who've never competed before, and they're like, oh, I want to go pro. It's like, well, let's see if you can even handle a prep in the first place, because you think you know what a prep is, but you don't. Like, no matter how many videos you've watched on Instagram, no how many videos you've watched on YouTube, or what your favorite bodybuilder says, like, until you have been in the middle of it, you cannot have an understanding of what it is. And that goes for any experience in life. Until you've been in the middle of just the shit of the grind of whatever pursuit it is you're after, you can't understand just the difficulty of that thing, right? So I feel like so many people come into things like this with like wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, like super excited and naive.
How do you know
like,
me?
yeah, I want to prep. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, do you want to prep, or
Yeah.
do you want to compete? Because they're two different things. And if you want to compete, you're in the right place, but hold on to your fucking pants, because I'm about to fuck you up. But not
Yeah,
in
yeah, I know what
context,
you
right?
mean.
Yeah. You definitely have to set those expectations. That was a long-winded way to say that.
No, no, it's exactly how I do it. And you're probably of a similar nature. It sounds that, I lay it out what a prep's going to look like, right, with a timeline, etc. But then I have this conversation, look, there is health adaptations, hormonally things are going to change, for that whole period of time in a prep. Things like meals out are going to change. You're going to need to speak to people close to you. Can you still do your job, whatever that's going to be, throughout this period of time? How much cognitive function do you need? What are you willing to put into it? How do we schedule it? And I feel like sometimes people that are bushy-tailed are like, fucking hell, this is a bit too much. But I really do feel like as coaches, we should be laying out, the intensity of the sport. Now, where you said there, another message that I always try and talk about, are you looking to prep and step on stage, or are you looking to be competitive and compete? Because then we add posing in, we add financial, there's so many different things. And I think sometimes maybe people think, oh, I'll be happy to step on stage, and then they step on stage and they're like, but I didn't place. And then it's a tricky time. And as coaches, I feel like we need to maintain that kudos, I guess, to go, this is why you didn't place. We needed to try it first. Let's move forward, rather than that disappointment because they've still done a prep.
Yeah. And like part of that there is like, how has that individual learned to cope with criticism? Right? Because like there's a number of different responses that I'm sure you've seen, where it's like there are some people who, like, if they could get off stage and got last place, and then they get their feedback from the judges, and the judges rip them a new asshole, but then they're like, yes, this is great, how can I be better? Right? And it motivates them and it pushes them along. Or you could have someone who was like on the verge of winning an entire show. They have a judge giving them the smallest critique ever, and then they hit the ceiling because it's like this big deal, and they go the other way, and they're like, well, fuck it, I'm giving up. And it's like, look, if your success in competitive bodybuilding is only dictated on placing all the time, forever, from the time you start to the time you finish, you're going to be disappointed more often than not, because one person wins. One. At the end of the day, there is a singular Mr. Olympia, right? There is a singular class winner. There is a singular overall. So it's like you go to some of these shows like here in Texas, like we had 700 people at the Battle of Texas. Like, yeah, the last show of the year, that was the week before nationals, there were 700 some odd competitors. My client Blake in classic physique at nationals had 40 people in his class. There was 50 in the class prior to that, and like 35 in the class before that. And there were still like 4 classes after that. So like the depth of field of these competitions has gotten so crazy. And the reality of it is, there's probably someone out there that eats fucking cornflakes and like a whole chicken every day and looks 10 times better than you do. Like, there's just this crazy thing about the human body, that there's just some people who just look like that. Like, there's just these freaks, and they're out there, and like, no matter how good you are, that person is there. There's a Phil Heath, there's a Ronnie Coleman sitting out there that's waiting to come through and make you look awful. Like, that's just the reality of bodybuilding. So it's like the biggest thing that like I try to invest in my people, or like bring home to people, is like, it is not about the trophy that you're handed that day. It is about, what did we do to improve from the last time, and how well did we control the things that we were in control of. All the other stuff does not matter. If we can't control it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because when you're in the depths of prep, you know, all the things that you're doing, the cardio, all the things you're saying no to per se, and all of that, you know, when you do step on stage, it's like, I fucking did that. And there's so much pride in that. Now, what we also need to remember is, we are part of a very small percentage in the world. But when you become a bodybuilder, you get on Instagram and you follow bodybuilders. So it's like, oh, everyone's a bodybuilder. But then you have a normal conversation with someone outside of bodybuilding, and they're like, you do that every day. And I do truly believe, you know, what we put in every day, even down to the minutiae, like with you with the blue light blockers, you know, all these little things, that they're small things, but they all accumulate to what bodybuilding is. You're trying to optimize your health. You're trying to optimize things for a prep or a growth phase. But then on the tangent of that, it's like, but it's not healthy. But it can be healthier, I believe. You can do it in a healthier way than maybe people believe. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, bodybuilding in and of itself is a healthy endeavor. Competitive bodybuilding is not, right? It's like, when we put competitive on the beginning of that, that's when things start to change, because in a competition, people are going to do whatever it takes to win, right? Like, there's going to be some insane dude who's been just taking everything he possibly can, right? And you'll see him coming. There's a lot of signs, like, you can see him. You're like, that's the guy right there. When we add competitive onto things, things start to change, because even if you're not going absolutely insane as far as like the drug side of things is concerned, you're probably being pretty insane compared to the normal population when it comes to your training, or where your diet is, or how much cardio you're doing, or how many steps in a day you're taking, or like these little things that go a long way to just push that boat forward, to get you to a point where you are the most muscular and shredded you can possibly be to present a physique, right? Like, it's just, you have to take these things to the edge of insanity, right? There's just this level that things have to go to, and that scales depending on where you're at in this sport, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I mentioned that I saw one of your reels as well about the PDs. Now, you spoke about, essentially, you know, are you nailing the basics of bodybuilding before you go down this route? Now, I cannot cheer that enough. You know, you actually said it already. Can you even do a prep? So the ideal, you know, try and do a prep first, explore your natural potential. Now, there's potentially, you know, where's the ceiling of that per se when we're looking at data and a physique, etc. But being able to maybe compete in natty feds if you want to, try the prep first, see if you enjoy it cathartically. It's a different enjoyment to what maybe normal population would see. But then it's like, okay, so do I need to potentially look at going down this route and go in the untested feds, etc., etc.? Now, if you have people come to you and they say, you know, I want to jump on PEDs, but they haven't got the sort of basic bodybuilding lifestyle, is that something you try and empower as much as you can before you go down that route?
Yeah, so before we get into that part, the last 3 people that I put on stage have all been 100% natural.
Nice.
Right. So like the last 3 guys, so Caden, Blake, and Jesse have all been completely natural. Blake won the overall in novice and open at Battle of Texas. That competition was 700 people. Jesse got second in his open class and then won masters, novice, and true novice. And then Caden got second in open at 19 years old and then won, I think, either novice or true novice. So like there's a lot. Then like the Blake has got some genetics where he could eventually be on the Olympia stage, and Caden and Jesse both have genetics that are very good as well. So it's like there is that component to that, but it's like, how can I even tell if you're willing to be able to do the diet part of this before I start telling you like intricate things that you need to do with compounds, right? Because it's like, look, the whole pursuit, natural or not, is difficult. And I would say to a certain degree, enhancing it is more difficult than not, because there's this whole other thing that you now have to handle because the PEDs are a stress to the body. It is something that we now have to consider in the big picture of keeping the train moving forward. Is it actually helping you be better, or is it detriment? Is it being a detriment? Right. So like, for example, something that people use on a regular basis, Clint, right? It's a fat burner that everybody uses. This last prep, I couldn't use it. I didn't use it because we would take 20 micrograms and I wouldn't be able to sleep. I could not fall asleep. And like sleep is going to be a much better PED than Clen ever can be. Good sleep will trump all the Clen you could ever take in a day as far as fat loss is concerned. So it's like, look, if sleep is so important that we don't use a compound, why would we need to focus on compounds if those things aren't in check? Right? Like if you aren't eating the way you need to, if you aren't training the way you need to, and when I say training, I mean executing, and how well can you execute close to failure, and how deep to failure can you take things? What are you willing to endure? Are you sleeping? Are you getting enough water? Are you using enough salt? It's like all of these things all come together to go, hey, well, look, if you haven't nailed these over here, if you're not salting your meals, just salting them, you're gonna like be like, damn, I feel like I just started taking testosterone. Like
I love salt.
like yeah, it's like it's like those little things, if you're not nailing those rocks to begin with, like you're not hitting your protein, you're not getting enough carbs, you're not doing enough cardio, like whatever it is that you're missing, is it's not throwing PEDs at it isn't just going to make that magically improve. If anything, it's going to make it worse, right? It's like the PED world has been a band-aid that has helped a lot of people look really cool for a short period of time and then completely fuck them on the back end, right? So like, how many coaches do you know that like just throw drugs at people and then don't really have a true understanding of how to handle nutrition and training for that client? And then that client ends up in a position where we're now having to deal with fixing their health markers because this dumbass over here just threw drugs and said more drugs, more drugs, more drugs. This will make you better, when you don't have the foundation of the house over here with your nutrition and training and so on.
Yeah, it genuinely, like, it actually hurts me when I get listeners reach out, and particularly around, you know, dosages, mainly females that would, you know, message off the back of listening to a podcast. Now, I've spoken about things like 𝗂𝗏, you know, what the dosage would be. And Dynamite was the first person that said it on the pod. He was like, you can start with like 2.55, see what the result is. And then, you know, potentially there's wiggle room to increase that. And there was people reaching out saying, oh, my coach just told me to do, you know, from being natty, nothing else, no other compounds, to 25 per day of 𝗂𝗏. And I'm thinking, and then also saying, there's not really any side effects to that. And I'm literally like, what the fuck is going on here? Do you know what I'm saying?
So do you know 𝗀𝗽𝗃𝗄𝗆?
I've seen on Instagram.
Yeah, so Corey's a friend. I actually got to meet her at Nationals the other week, so that was really cool. We've chatted a lot on Instagram. She made a post the other day that said just because there was an absence of side effects with things that you've used in the past does not mean that that is the way to go, right? It's like a lot of times when we start looking at the side effects of like the enhancement side of things, it is a compounding effect. It is something that it's not something that like you're not going to take a shot of testosterone and die. Like you're not just going to you're not going to take a shot of testosterone and you're going to have a heart attack. That's not how this works. It is a compounded effect over years and years because of abuse of your system that comes together, because usually those people who are going that crazy to the extent where they are getting life risking side effects, it's because they've probably been abusing the drugs. They've probably also been abusing their stomach. They've probably also been abusing their sleep. They've probably also been abusing recreational drugs to mask dumb shit that they've got made for themselves, right? So it's like it's this mixing pot of just dumb that leads to these bigger issues that people pass on. And like again, there are outliers where it's like, yes, there are going to be some people who like just take a little bit of things and get some they get kidney failure, right? Where it's like, hey, look, that was in your cards. Like you were probably going to have kidney failure to begin with. You just sped it way the fuck up. So it's like those things are going to happen. But for the most part, when we see these like crazy things of like, oh, this kid died at 28, it's like, okay, well, what was he doing? Like, how many things was he doing to compound that effect of this thing?
Yeah, and when you feed that into longevity, you know, yes, okay, you're willing to put your life on the line. That reminds me of Ali G, putting the life on the line for a prep, and you know, everything is centered around that. And potentially, like you say, stimulant use is going in. You may be doing exposure to something like 𝗂𝗏 or whatever that may be. That titrates up. You're leaning on things like caffeine more. Sleep is affected. All of those things. And then in your example earlier of, okay, I'll have 4 weeks as a health phase, and then I'll push up. So I liken it to psychologically, you know what you're doing. So you're like, yeah, this is sick, you know, loving it. Now I'm growing, whatever. Your body is going, what the fuck is going on? You know, even I always, you know, talk to Matt, my other half, about it. In a peak, you know, if you're in the assisted realms, some of the stuff you're using for the peak alone, I had that recollection of like, my body's going through some extreme shit right here just to get me on stage.
Yeah, most definitely. And like, even if we don't use diuretics and things like that for peaking and whatnot, just the dehydration process of getting on stage is like not good for you. Like, we shouldn't intentionally not drink water. And that's like one of the things that we do is like, maybe we don't completely cut it out, but it's like we've drastically reduced it when we're adequately hydrating ourselves. And it's like, we all know how detrimental just dehydration can be on the entire system that is the human body. And that's why you're just in a haze that day. That's why like it's honestly hard to look back at shows and remember everything that was going on and like be in that moment, because you're just in this like fog of dehydration. It's like
And
even that
carbs.
alone. Yeah, right. It's like just that alone is a crazy thing to do to yourself. So like then if you add on these other crazy peak things that people like to do that they think is going to magically make them get in shape, it's like, yeah, for sure, your body's freaking the fuck out. So it's like it's not, again, it's not something that you can just fix the next day. It's like it's something that has to be given time to process. Like if we spent 16 or 20 weeks in a bodybuilding prep, there was damage accrued over that time. You're not going to fix that in 4 weeks. You're like, there are some people who can recover faster than others, which that is a genetic gift for bodybuilding, right? But there's a lot of people who like really need to lean into like, hey, I need to relax for a good period of time. I'm redlining my system, and if I continue to do this, I'm not going to be able to continue to do this.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, you mentioned about gut. That would be a good tangent for us to go on in regards to longevity, for sure. And there's many stories that I'm sure we've both come across, but things that we do in a prep when, you know, you're of course cutting out major food groups, particularly at the tail end. You're eating very little. Fiber can become an issue depending on who your coach is, right? But you know, you're doing lots of things to pretty much prop yourself up. So then that recovery period off the back of the show, if that's then inundated with post-show foods that people will you know, potentially go down that route of the higher calorific foods, all of those things that you start putting in the body when it's been in this 16-week period of none of those foods. If we continue to do that cycle, essentially taking out micronutrients from your diet to do the prepping itself.
Right.
And then you start, you know, going through these post-show periods, and you maybe expect that the digestion's just going to come back, and what that could lead to.
Yeah, I mean, like, perfect example is myself. It's like my stomach is not the best. Like, it's a little sensitive, right? So like coming out of the show, we were having some issues with my digestion. I was dealing with like some extreme bloating, some extreme gas, some like back and forth between diarrhea and constipation, and just really bad issues where it's like I wasn't hungry, I had no appetite, everything felt like shit. And it's like we had to pull some stuff back. We had to strip away some red meat for a bit. We had to introduce some different food sources. We had to introduce like some sauerkraut and extra vegetables and things like that to like work on getting my stomach in check, because IBS is very common in our industry with like the way we push food up and down, right? The stomach can get messed up very fast, like SIBO and H. pylori and IBS. Like all of these things are issues that people deal with on a regular basis. And they're just like, well, this is just my stomach. It's like, no, that's not how that works.
This is bodybuilding.
Yeah, right. It's like, no, you're not supposed to feel like that all the time. It's like, yeah, sure, there might be some uncomfortableness to your stomach in the points of like deep in a prep or deep in an off season, but you shouldn't be experiencing extreme bloat, extreme gas, extreme like bowel movements and things like that. I'm very much not in the camp of pushing a rebound post show. And what I mean by rebound in this context is like, yes, I do believe that we need to get some food back in your system. We need to get some weight back on your body and whatnot. But I am not in the camp of this being a super anabolic phase for people, right? It's like if we think about it logically, it kind of just doesn't make sense, right? It's like I understand that people look at it and go, well, cool, I'm getting like my muscles are super filled with food right now. I'm getting these crazy pumps. I feel super strong, like all that stuff. It's like, yeah, but you just went through this time period where you literally tried to starve yourself and got all of your storage for a famine off. Like it's all gone. Your body thinks it's going to die.
Yeah.
If you run out of food, you got nothing to go. Like there's nothing to pull from. So it wants to get those stores back because it wants you to live. It wants to keep fat around your organs. It wants to keep fat on your body so that we can be prepared when the shit hits the fan. Like that is what our human system is designed to do, is to protect us and spread our genetics. Like it's trying to protect us. So like if we're doing everything possible to like fuck with that,
stop.
Right, to do the exact opposite of that. It's like it's not going to just go, oh cool, he really wants to put on a lot of muscle right now. It's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like, wow, look at all this food that I can store as body fat in this guy's face. Like so it's like I've seen so many of these people that they're like 4 or 5 weeks post show and they're posting up a picture in their stories going, still not fat yet, up 45 pounds. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Your face looks like it's going to explode. Like, what are we doing? It's crazy.
Also, I mean, this leads into it. Cheers. You know, there are particularly, I find, and it does upset me a bit from being that bushy-eyed natty. You know, I'd watch assisted athletes and I'd think, oh, wow, they're eating 4,000 calories a day, a bikini girl. I can do that. Oh no, my calories are only 2,000. That makes me feel really fucking shit. And then it leads to you maybe wanting to, and I didn't, but you could potentially see people would go, well, I'm going to eat that stuff because they are. And that means I'm going to be like them. And social media, like this is why when I saw your page, I was like, fucking amen. Like there's someone talking about, you know, the longevity in this sport, but also I do have lifestyle people, you know, listen, that are into bodybuilding as a discipline. And I actually find, I don't know about you, that sometimes the lifestyle side of the sport, or whatever we want to label it as, there's more gratefulness there to what they're achieving.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because like the people who are in the lifestyle, or like the lifestyle side of things, that like do the bodybuilding without the competitive side of things, it's like they haven't had the experience of being competitive. They haven't had the experience of being rewarded for what their physique looks like. And they're just going, wow, I got a new vein today. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
And like they're super excited about that stuff. So yeah, that's definitely that too. But I mean, I think to a certain extent, you have to, in order to want to be a bodybuilder, you kind of have to have a little bit of an ego, right? Like I think we all have this thing in our head where like you think like I could do that, I could be that good. And then like you're faced with the reality at some point of like, okay, maybe I can't, for most of us, right?
Yeah.
But that we all have a little bit of an ego, and then that ego scales for some people where it's like if that ego is never checked, or you don't have people around you who like keep you in check and like let you know like, hey, look, you're being a little much. Like it's very easy for like, especially when we look at the enhanced world, to let that ego just inflate and inflate and inflate. Because I honestly, I think that the most anabolic things that PEDs do is inflate people's egos, right? Because it's like they are able to do crazy things while they're using these PEDs, and they now start to believe that this is what they are, with who they are, right? When it's like, hey, look, the reality of this is that can go away very quickly. Like it can be gone like that. And we've seen it a million times. And I don't just mean dying. I mean, like you might get to a point where you can't take them anymore, or maybe you can't lift anymore, or like there's a lot of things that can happen. So it's like between like the ego being inflated and then their self-worth being invested in their body and how they perceive themselves to the world, is like it's so intertwined together that sometimes with the competitive side of the world, you definitely get people who is like, they expect things, you know?
Yeah. It's a shame as well, because I truly believe you can get so much from this journey, like I've already mentioned. And you're right about ego. Now, people say, oh, ego's really bad, but we all have it, and actually it can be utilized, right? So, it's a bit like stress. Some people will have a very low level stress and go, oh my God, I'm really stressed. But actually, a low level of stress can lead to you being more productive. Similar to the ego, you can utilize it. But then you almost get into this, like you say, inflated ego. But then what's hard is when you do see this on social media or in gyms or whatever else, you got someone that's really, really fucking having to work because they don't have the genetics, no sporting background, etc., etc. And they're maybe what you'd see as more of the sort of right attitude towards it. They're working really hard, they're nailing everything, and it can take away from that because maybe their physique, it's not got that much potential, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah, you just deal with all sorts of types of people within the world of this pursuit. It's like it draws a lot of different people, and like you get the people who this stuff comes really easy to and they take it for granted. And you get the people who like it's very difficult for them and they love every second of it. Right. And like maybe they're never going to be Ronnie Coleman, but like where they get to, they absolutely love it. Right. So there's definitely a lot of that. I think more people need to make sure that the people that are closest to them are keeping them in check. Right. It's like, I know that my friends who are like in my close friends group of like, I will tell them things about my personal life and like they'll be connected to me and whatnot. I know that if I'm doing something that's completely off the rails and I'm not right, that I can go to them and they're going to go, hey dude, you fucked that up. Like that's not what you were supposed to do. And it's like, I value that so highly over somebody just being like, oh no, you're right, man. It's like, well, was I? Like, are you sure?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, I want to have real feedback here. I want to have real discourse with you, because like I'm someone that like, if you're not prepared to be held to a standard, you don't need to be around me, because I'm going to check you on things. And I check people regularly. Like, and some of the things that we need to check people more on is gym etiquette, right? And like the way people handle themselves in a public space that is not their stuff. It's like, it is absolutely insane. It's like, you can tell the people whose moms didn't tell them to clean up after themselves.
Yeah.
So you can pick those fuckers out real fast. So it's like, if I'm not, those are just people in my vicinity that like aren't close to me. So it's like, if I'm willing to call those people out, I need the people closest to me to be willing to call me out on the biggest things possible, more than just like, oh, I didn't clean up my weights, of like, hey, dude, the way you handled that situation was wrong. It's like things like that, that's what helps keep that ego in a healthy position, right?
Mm.
Because like no one who's done anything great didn't have an ego. There's not a single person who has done something that we like know their name where that person didn't at some point go, I'm the shit, right? So it's like you got to have that. You got to have that feeling, but at the same time, you got to have people who like bring you down to earth as well. Of like, you're also not shit at the same time on the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, even in the sport of bodybuilding, right? So because it's so subjective, like you say, you can't guarantee a win. That is how it is. I was watching well, he's called Sylvester Stallone, obviously, but I always call him Rocky. I was watching a documentary of him, and like you said there, any names we know, they've had to use ego. But it was, I didn't expect it from the documentary, but he basically everything he went to, producers, and they just kept pushing him away because he had the like, the lip drop, and they were sort of saying, no, you're not built for being an actor, and he kept going and he kept going. Now, of course, he's one of the well-known actors in the world. But what was sad about it, a bit like what I spoke about relationships earlier, he looks back and he goes, right, so I didn't spend time with my children, didn't spend time with my close ones. I was so invested in being an actor that I've got nothing now. I'm here on my own, and I don't know where that's going to go. And I just, straight away thought, okay, that's very much like bodybuilding. But those relationships you spoke about there, so fucking crucial. Now, what would be interesting to ask you, how do you find your people? Because it does just happen, right? But is there certain things that you look for in people?
Not necessarily, but like I feel like over the years I've honed my bullshit meter pretty well. Of like I have a pretty like good knack for like not even maybe it's a bad thing, but like I don't even necessarily have to communicate with somebody. I can just kind of watch them, watch their body language, watch how they handle themselves, watch how they speak to other people, watch how they deal with people around them, and you can kind of get a picture for people of like, all right, he's a good guy. All right, no, like you can get this kind of instinctual feel once you've been around enough people, and to be honest, you've gotten fucked over enough times, right? A lot of times, I guess it's more of a selfish protection thing, right? Of like, hey, look, I've been fucked over by a lot of people that it seemed like they had really good intentions. So now like my red flag goes up real fast. And there's certainly been times where like I've had a red flag flown up in my head, but like it turns out to be completely wrong. And some of those people have become my best friends. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of times where I'm pretty fucking right on those. But I've been very privileged and blessed to kind of be where I am and like have things fall together the way that they did, just connections, just showing up, right? Where it's like the world has a funny way of bringing things together the way it's supposed to when you have the right intentions.
Yeah, for sure. And we could actually probably transfer that into coaching. Now, when you're looking for a coach, and it's something that people do ask me about a lot, how do you know who the right coach for you is? And I always recommend multiple consults unless you catch that vibe and it's like, this is the coach for me. Maybe
Right.
to their clients, if you can, look at their content, stuff like this. Is there anything else expanding on that you would recommend to people that are looking to get a coach or even change coach?
One of the biggest things for me is like there's a plethora of people who are coaching now that have no real experience, that haven't been in the trenches. They haven't done this thing. And like, look, some there are some coaches out there that have never stepped on a stage ever that are fantastic coaches, and some of them are my friends, right? And so like it's not like that isn't the case. It's not like 100% of the time you have to have gotten on stage in order to be a good coach. Like that there are people who don't necessarily have to have competed before in order to be good at this. But for me personally, for like I need someone that when I send them a message and I send them my feedback, I have them in a pedestal to where when they give me that information, it feels as if it is a directive from someone that I respect, that I like look up to, that is someone that I want to model myself after, right? And if my pursuit is to be a bodybuilding coach or be a good bodybuilder, it's like I want somebody who is doing the same, right? So it's like as I have established myself in the coaching, I haven't competed much since I started being a trainer, like a personal trainer to start, and then an online coach. I've competed twice, right? And like the last time before this, it was a 2-year time span, and the time before that was a 3-year time span. So it's like my bodybuilding is more so an endeavor of like, there's always something I get out of doing a prep. There's something always I have on the other side that helps me be a better person, because I put myself through the crucible. I put my foot to the flame and I felt the heat, and like I went through that process. So there's something good that comes out of that, like hard grinding endeavor that you have to push yourself when nobody's watching. There's something to that I enjoy, that makes me a better human.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, it also makes me a better coach, right? Because it's like, just because my nose is in a book and just because I have done the research doesn't mean I understand what that means when it is applied in reality. It's like, I want to apply these things that I'm learning to myself as an experiment, right? That doesn't mean that I'm going to be an idiot and experiment with things that are just crazy, right? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, let's test things and see what I am capable of, so that when I tell somebody, I need you to do X, Y, and Z in order to be at this point for your show, they know that I'm not just some fucking fat guy on a couch telling them, being a, what is it? What do they call it? A Monday morning quarterback or something like that, where it's like you're watching the highlights going, well, you should have done this here. It's like, well, what, you weren't there. So like, what the fuck do you know? Like, how do you know in the situation, in the fire, in the heat of the moment, that this is the right thing to do? You know, it's like, and I can say that because I've done it, I've experienced it, I've lived it.
Yeah, I like that. And even, you know, when people look to change coaches, because maybe they've been that bushy tail person and gone, this is a bodybuilding coach, I'm going to go with them, and they maybe don't gel. What would your advice be to someone? I've asked this question to a multitude of guests, so it's always interesting. Someone that's not gelling with their coach, and maybe they've gone with one of the coaches that's like, we're going to fucking war here. Here's your plan. Shut the fuck up. If they want more, what would you advise someone, if they're listening, to do, you know, to come away from a coach? Because we often find it quite hard, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like, first and foremost, I think it's very, for at least for myself, like there's some people who like don't want to have any kind of like real, not necessarily like, it doesn't need to be a friendship, but there needs to be, for me, there needs to be some kind of connection to the person that I'm going to work with, where it's like, I need to enjoy like talking to this individual and like how they handle me, right? It's like, that's why me and Chris Tuttle have hit it off so well, and why he's been my coach for 4 years, and why I'll never have another coach. It's like, because he has become not just a coach, but a friend and a mentor, because we were so like-minded, and because we see things very similarly, right? Where it's like, I feel privileged to be able to call my coach a friend. So it's like, to me, I want to be able to have, it doesn't necessarily need to go to that level, but I need to make sure that like I have a good connection with the person that I'm going to be coached by. So I definitely think that like, if you're missing that, and there it is, that doesn't mean that they need to be texting you on a Tuesday about like random stuff. It's like, it should be about the coaching. And like, if there's something that offshoots from that, cool. But it's like, it needs to be centered around what you're doing, that you enjoy communicating with each other. So if that's not there, then like, honestly, the biggest thing is, just like we talked about before, is like, we need to be open and honest with that individual. It's like, hey, look, like, this is what I'm getting from this experience, and I don't feel like it is meeting my expectations of what I want in coaching. Is it something we can fix to make better, to make our coaching relationship better? Or is it something where I need to go find somebody else that I connect better with? Right. It's like, I think too many people are scared to have that conversation and go like, hey, look, this is what I expected, but this is what I'm getting. Let's have a conversation to make sure we're on the same page. And maybe that coach is not willing to do that. There's so many coaches that I know where it's like, hey, look, no, shut the fuck up. You got your plan, execute and check in, and I'll tell you what to do from there. Like, that's it. It's like, if you're not that individual that works well with that, the coaching relationship is going to crumble, right? It's just like any other relationship. So it's like, you got to find the coach that coaches to you, that coaches to what helps you be better.
Yeah, because let's not forget, you're paying for a service, right? So actually, you know, if you went and got your car done, you spoke about cars earlier, you know, and there was something wrong or didn't meet your expectations, maybe it was promised to you in a different way as well. People do get that. It's like, would you just go, oh, okay, I take the car, it hasn't got an engine, they've taken it out, you know, that's cool. You wouldn't, you know, you'd be pissed.
Right.
And you'd even think about, you know, suing them and shit. But I think sometimes we do forget that, you know, you are paying for a service, and some people do really well with a plan. However, I don't know what your thoughts are. I think, you know, even if we are a robot at nature, I can certainly be a robot, and I'm sure you can. Mental health wise, when you then look at the longevity, which is what we've been speaking to today, you know, we are a person, and I think we can only punish ourselves so much in life, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's really easy to just get caught up in that, get in a system and getting like, especially for myself, like if there was no other, like I would do the same thing every single day for eternity if someone didn't stop me, right? It's like I'm very comfortable in a routine. I'm very comfortable in doing the same thing daily. I'm very comfortable within those things, but there's some people that aren't, right? So it's like, at the same time, that being comfortable within like being in a routine could also be something that hinders us. So
Yes.
it's like, it's again one of those things where it's like we just need to pay attention to the patterns that are like, this is a good thing for me, it is helping me move forward. This is something that is part of my pattern that is not good for me and holding me back. So just changing those things and whatnot. So I forgot what the original question was there,
But
but
with the longevity, you know, of mental health, and actually
right,
mainly what you're saying there, isn't it? Self-actualization. You know, it was hard for me to
right.
holiday for 10 years because I was like, cut my routine.
Right, for sure. And again, it comes back to just again, like this is why is one of the main things that I lead with when anybody comes on is like, I need to open and honest communication, right? Because I know if I'm at a point where like I feel like dog shit, my training sucks, my stomach sucks, like I feel terrible, but I'm in my routine, I'm executing 100% to the plan, and I don't tell Chris, and then all of a sudden something goes terribly wrong, and then I have to tell him, well, hey, look, I've not been feeling good for a long period of time. He's going to go, why the fuck did you not tell me? Right? He's going to want to know like why I didn't tell him that. So it's like, it's one of those things where like you just need to make sure that you communicate those things of like, look, I don't feel okay, my head is not in this right now, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, people are scared oftentimes to like, look, yeah, I feel a little depressed right now. It's
Yeah.
like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing wrong with you being depressed. Now, what is wrong is just hunkering down in it and just being like, well, this is me now. I'm a little bit depressed. So now I'm just depressed forever. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, feel the feelings, do what you need to do, but then take the steps to get the fuck out of it. Right? Like, do what you have to do to keep moving forward. Because like the last thing that you need to do is end up stagnant, because nothing grows in stagnant water. Like nothing lives in stagnant water, right? It's like you get bacteria and death.
Yeah.
It's got to move, it's got to keep going. So like, you can feel those feelings, you can feel that way, you can have a rough mental day, you can have a rough mental week or month or year, but at some point you need to get the fuck out of it.
Oh, I love that. Such a way to wrap up before we answer a listener question. Now,
Yeah.
before we answer the question, now I spoke to you before about, are you taking coaching clients? So how would people, would it be Instagram they reach out? Do you have like a link if someone was interested off the
Yep.
back of this?
Yeah, I mean, what coach doesn't have their link in their bio, right? It's like, that's the thing to do. So yeah,
I've
link
only
in my
got 5
bio.
spaces left.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. But there's 50 people that they've signed up from that. But yeah, there's a link in my bio that's just, it says join the team, and then it'll take you to a jot form where you can fill out some basic information just to see if like, are we even going to be a good fit before we start the Zoom call? And then you can schedule a call with me for Zoom as well, where we just sit down and have a conversation and go, hey, look, is this going to be a good fit? This is what I need from you. This is what I expect for the level of what it is that you've asked for, whether it's lifestyle or stage, right? And then we go forward from there. So if you have questions, you can always drop questions in my DMs on Instagram as well, and I'd be happy to answer those. But yeah, to find out about like the full coaching, is the best way to do it is to show me you're serious, is just fill out the form, because it is so funny how many people you tell to fill out a form and they can't even do it. So it's like, if you can't do that, you're not going to do what I need you to do for what it is you're trying to do. So it just fill out the form. It shows effort.
Yeah. Well, it's like it blows my mind that people pay for coaching, and luckily I don't get this myself, but they don't check in. And I think, what are you paying for?
Yeah, right. Like, what? Why are we doing this? Like, thanks for your money. I appreciate it for
Yeah.
sure. But like,
Yeah.
do you want something back, or is this just a gift?
Yeah, it's wild, absolutely wild. Now, Vicky, who actually found the pod this year and she binge watched it because there's 2 years worth now, she actually asked the question, as a coach, what would your main concerns be for female athletes over the age of 50? Thoughts around menopause, keeping muscle density, other health concerns. And she got into competing later in life, and that's sort of where it's guided around and what we would look at, you know, compared to a younger athlete. Now, of course, I'm sure you'd agree it's very individual to the person, but is there certain things that you'd sort of have a conversation around if someone came to you in that scenario?
Yeah, 100%. I
Nice.
mean, I have a client that I work with now that's a master's individual who like has not been handled well in the past, and that now we're dealing with like a lot of issues like hormonally that is holding her back from being able to like she's got a stellar frame, she's got a great physique, but it's like we're having a hard time getting her to a point where like her body wants to get body fat off, right? So it's like, especially if we're looking at somebody who's postmenopausal, we now need to like look more into the HRT world. Like if she is not like, if she's in, she probably has enhanced herself at some point, which was probably done poorly, which probably didn't help everything else that was going on. And so like now we need to start looking at like, okay, well, if we're postmenopausal, how bad is your progesterone? How bad is your estrogen? How bad is your testosterone? How well is your thyroid functioning? It's like these things that it's like you have to tackle kind of like one at a time, because it's like, well, if we fix your progesterone and estrogen, Jesus, maybe that fixes this other issue we have over here, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it makes something worse. So it's like, okay, we got this here, but now this is way off, and now we need to fix this. So it's like there's a cascade of hormones, especially when we look at females, where it's like the old way of thinking when it comes to handling females for stage is they are small men. And that's not the case. You
Yes.
can't just go, well, this is what guys take, so you take just this smaller amount and that's going to work well. It's like, no, like the female body goes through a ridiculous cycle of hormones every month. Like they are constantly changing. A man's body, like without testosterone replacement stuff, is pretty even keel. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't change that much unless something wild happens. But it's like females' bodies naturally go through these ebbs and flows. And then if we take something and just throw a monkey wrench into the cogs of it, it's like something's gonna break. It's not going to continue to tick and function the way it used to. So hormones is the biggest thing. So like you're really gonna have to be on top of looking at blood work, balancing out like the progesterone, the estrogen, the testosterone, your thyroid. Like and then there's a ton of other cascade of things of like, what's your adrenal health like? What is your like the cortisol levels? It's like there's so many things that we need to look at and try and navigate, where it's like, okay, we'll try this and that didn't fix it. And we try this and that didn't fix it. So we just got to keep diving into it.
Yeah, and actually, I saw another reel on your social media of a lady that you'd taken on from another coach, and I think she did like a testimonial to say how in depth your training execution was. So that would be a great way to finish off the pod in regards to someone that's got
Yeah.
into the sport. I know my training was absolute dog shit for the first period of time because I didn't know what the fucking hell I was doing. Now, if you're getting into
Well,
the
no one does.
sport, yeah, and you know the training execution, what would you sort of advise there if the coach isn't really talking about the execution, they just deliver a plan?
Yeah. So like if you're just being given a plan and it's like, all right, cool, go do a lat pull down, and then you're just doing your interpretation of what a lat pull down is, it's like
Yeah.
those two things could be drastically different, because the coach is probably going, cool, well, if I write lat pull down, they're gonna do this and then they'll be fine. But it's like, hey, look, I have seen some wild shit when I say, hey, go do a lat pull down, and then somebody's like, I watch somebody do it and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? So it's like how did you manage to end up in this position? Again, this doesn't even make sense in the context of what we're looking at. There's a video next to what I told you to do and we're still messing this up. So like the variety of things that can go wrong if we are not looking at training footage or being with that individual in person is just so vast. So it's like you're running a race with one eye closed. Like you've got no depth of what's happening if you are not having your finger on the pulse of what's happening with training. So again, back to what I said at the beginning, is like, I've worked with people who have never lifted before in their entire life, and this is the first time they've ever lifted a weight is via my instruction. And I've lifted with one of the best bodybuilders in the world, 𝗲𝗏. And the thing that every single one of these people have in common is there is something we can tweak to make things better. Like there are so many times where I've watched Hunter's execution and gone, look, hey, look, just do this with your shoulder. He makes one small change and he's like, oh shit, that feels great. So it's like little things like that go such a long way, especially at the higher levels of like the smaller minutia we have to pay so much more attention to the further along we get, because it takes that much effort to get a stimulus. So it's like the training execution is like one of the most important things. And again, we go back to the conversation we had about like people just wanting to hop on PEDs. Do you want a PED? Execute correctly, close to failure. That's a fucking PED if you haven't been using it. If you haven't been doing that and you start doing that, you're going to go, holy shit, like I'm getting some results here. Like it's going to blow your mind. So you definitely got to have somebody paying attention to your execution and your form and making sure that you're taking your sets where they need to go.
Yeah, love that. Love that. So, of course, guys, thank you for listening. And if you want to share on your stories and tag us, I'm sure Nick will be up for that. And of course, everyone needs to up their salt, be careful with PEDs, and be ready for the fucking wild ride of bodybuilding. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
See you later.